Welcome to this XenoTalk in the context of a series of discussions with our hosts about xenotransplantation. As today is a pleasure to host Marion Siebelink. She's from Groningen, it's an important center in Europe, as you know. She has an incredible curriculum about ethical issues. She got her PhD on pediatric transplantation, but then she developed an incredible expertise, and now she is a member of ELPAT, dedicated to the ethical issues related to pediatric transplantation, as well as she's now chair of the ethical committee of the Dutch Transplantation Society, and she is member of the ethical committee of Eurotransplant. So incredible expertise in ethical issues as far as transplantation is concerned. Marion, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Now, clearly we are following up this incredible experience that has been done in US, transplanting a heart from a pig to a human, and this is disruptive from the scientific, clinical, but also, I would say, from a human point of view. My first question is related to the fact that I personally feel that there is an intrinsic contradiction, as usual, when we have these huge advances in science. On one side, the community achieved an incredible success because the survival of this patient was incredibly long if compared to the previous experiences. We have many weeks of survival. So this researcher accumulated an enormous amount of pieces of information from the scientific point of view in order to develop further research. But on the other side, from the patient point of view, I would say this is a partial not successful because he died. So how can we put these two relevant positions together? And this is clearly evident in all the situation where the science do in humans big step ahead. Still, there is a price to pay from the individual point of view, from the patient point of view. Which is your position?
It's a very good question. And I think, of course, all the scientific development started somewhere. And you see with this case that I think this patient knew that he should die in a certain time. And I think, and I hope, but I think that this is also discussed with this patient. So we can help him. It's not for this patient that he is helped with this heart of this pig. But of course, what I already said, every scientific innovative issue is starting somewhere. And the question is this a balanced situation? And how many cases do we need to know what we really offer to a patient in need of transplantation, and when we have xenotransplantation as only option for this patient? So I think this will be a main question to ask ourselves. What is really the future of xenotransplantation? What is the really benefit for the patient in need for transplantation?
Yeah, that's very relevant. It's also very interesting to know that FDA at the very beginning said okay to this protocol, but FDA wanted that this combination have been tried first on 40 baboon or on 40 primates before going into clinical. But then this situation happened that this patient had compliance problems and was not eligible, not for a mechanical support, nor for a classical transplantation from a DCD or DPD. So, so that combination it's really very particular. I mean, because that patient was not compliant. You know? So, don't you think that is so difficult, ethically speaking, to select those patients that may be proposed with such an advanced procedure?
Yeah, I think that is one of the difficult issues. And looking at discussions in our country, a lot of people are thinking about xenotransplantation as a solution, what is already there. So I think when you are selecting patients for this issue, it's such a rare event, such a difficult situation. And that's one of my questions, that this recipient of the heart of the pig, I don't know how he is involved, and his family also. It's not only about patients, also about the family related to him, how they are approached during this whole situation.
Do you think that in providing pieces of information before this difficult selection and difficult choice to go to a xenotransplantation, would be good to have for sure a psychologist in the team delivering the information clearly, but also an ethicist?
Yes, I think you need a multidisciplinary team to support not only the patient and his family, but also the medical professionals, to have a balanced situation that everyone agreed with this option.
Going in line with what speaking about such a difficulty in having ethical approval from the regulatory bodies in such an advanced kind of scientific situation, where you want to translate into humans something that is not clearly well clear at the moment. I feel that there is a huge amount of differences in terms of ethical standards according to cultural, religious, and geographical situations. I'm not sure that, for example, we in Italy would have been approved about such a procedure. Don't you think that it's time? Clearly, this cultural perception cannot be cancelled in a moment. But at least that ethicists at the European level or even at global level should gather and try to create standards, if it's possible to speak about standards in as far as ethical issues are concerned.
Yeah, it's. I think the ideal picture of doing good, but I think, of course, there are differences between countries. There are also differences between countries regarding to a transplant program. For example, some countries don't have a thoracic transplant program at all. So there are some differences, and they are still there. And I think it's like a utopia to think that we can have this all on the same level. So I think for these big issues, you need to look country specific, to look what is the cultural habits of this community, and then also look what can be the damage of the whole transplant program when we introduce xenotransplantation, because one of my concerns is that the public opinion regarding organ donation in general, human organ donation in general, will be more difficult to explain when we have xenotransplantation. Some people already ask me, why should I become a donor when you have the xenotransplantation and it's almost a reality? So I think, looking at your question, we have to look country specific and probably Western Europe specific or US specific. What is the best way to go forward with xenotransplantation?
Clearly, that's absolutely true. But in a very globalized world, you know, it looks so still so relevant, which are the differences. I'm thinking, for example, about the fact that in Italy we have a 20-minute no touch time for the DCD, when, you know, a few kilometers far you have 5 minutes or 10. So
yeah.
Still, these differences are striking, and in a way, we need, at least at the European level, we need to try to find a common denominator, at least.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with you regarding the DCD, for example. That can be that those differences exist, but for something what is so experimental, yeah, then I think that's not the time to think more globally from an ethical point of view.
I agree, totally agree with that. Marion, thank you. I'm looking to the future now for a moment. Let's do an exercise of fantasy. And let's say that xenotransplantation is already a clinical reality. One of the ethical issues that this will pose to our community is how to select those patients that are going to receive a xeno versus a human organ. This may introduce discriminative approaches, and there is a potential for, you know, some community disagreement on that. Which is your position?
It's a very good question. And I think the only solution is to discuss this with the patients in need for transplantation, because I think we have a kind of similar situation now, that you can offer a DCD donor, or you can offer a DVD donor. And we also ask the patients when they are placed on the waiting list this question. And I think a kind of similar question when this fantasy is become reality, that you can say, we can offer you a xenotransplantation. These are the benefits, these are the risks. And you have to make a shared decision with the patient. And I think also in this case, there is more support needed from psychological point of view or ethical point of view, so that the patient is well informed and also can make a good decision on the good information. And I think that is the only solution, because of course the benefits of a xenotransplantation is that, you know, there is no waiting time. The pig needs to grow, and you know, oh, that pig is walking in the field, and that's my liver in that pig. This kind of situations are I think they are a reality in the future, when the fantasy is become a reality. So you can say, okay, that's the benefit, but there are also, I think, huge amount of risks. And it's only the patient who should balance this risk versus benefits.
So your suggestion that I find extremely interesting is that in the selection process, the psychological profile of the patient would be a very relevant point of view, because even today with the cadaveric donation, some patients still deeply do not accept psychologically donation because they feel that is other. And can you imagine if this other is an animal, that may introduce psychological disturbances that may be relevant. So the psychological profile would be relevant.
I will say it should be obligatory.
Yeah, fundamental.
Because it's the only way to make a good decision.
Yeah, beside the clinical issues, of course, clearly.
Of course.
Marion, one last question. Speaking about the animal issue, the complexity of xenotransplantation is so relevant, but is even more huge in a sense, because it introduces the concept of which animal, why animal, and which is the impact on animal manipulation on the population and on the collective perception in a way. Some animalists are against, there is someone that say that is too much on nature and stuff like that. These pigs have been manipulated strongly because 10 genes have been manipulated. So this is not just a touchy, it's a relevant change in the animal structure and nature. What do you think from the ethical point of view?
Yeah, I can imagine that people are worried about this kind of issues. And I think the main question is, can we use animals for the human benefits? And we already do by eating meat and so on. And this is many steps more than that. And I think it's a relevant question to think about what are the limits in the transplant scientific program. And sometimes you can say, these are our limits. Of course, people are thinking about the well-being of the animals. And this is also a point of view what we have to take into account. And I don't have a clear answer. It's, I think, very personal how people think about using animals for our health. But I think one of the issues for our transplant society is also how to communicate this in the public opinion. And that can be also what I mentioned before, a risk, because you're crossing borders about the whole natural system of our planet. So it's not very clear answer, I realize, but I think everyone has to think about this, him or herself, very deeply. And I think our transplant society needs to discuss this, because it's not an issue to ignore.
I was wondering if in the Dutch community, you already started a discussion on xenotransplantation, and which is the potential impact of opening to xenotransplantation to the community overall and to the perception of the transplantation as a whole.
Yes, we started this discussion last year, and one of my worries, which I dropped there, was my worries about the public opinion and how xenotransplantation will influence the public opinion about organ donation as a whole. And I am worried about the fact that people are saying, okay, when xenotransplantation is one of the possibilities, why should I become a donor? So for our whole organ donation program, xenotransplantation can be also a risk. And I think that we have to take this into account.
And in line with this, for what you're saying, we are talking to the transplant ESOT society and the transplant ESOT community. My, let's say, provocative question to you is, what can ESOT and ELPAT in particular do in order to promote this discussion that you were mentioning a couple of minutes ago? Do you think that we should be very active in, putting in the center of the discussion these issues, or is it too early? What is your opinion?
No, I don't think it's too early. I think it's good that we start this discussion because it's already there. So the case in the US opened our eyes again about the possibilities. And I think that it's very important to take all those ethical issues directly into account in what do we think, what is good care for this patient. And probably when this fantasy is reality and xenotransplantation is part of our whole transplant system, but that can be the future. But I think when you need to face those ethical issues to develop good care. And I think that the task of the ESOT is to start these discussions on different levels, and also taking the public opinion into account.
Thank you very much, Marion, for your time. Thank you.
You're welcome.